Previously on Wentworth, Ruby was charged with the murder of Zaina and the minister had her transferred to Blackmore. The minister was on the warpath and also ordered Lou Kelly to be transferred to St. Clair. Lou and her brother Travis blackmailed Janet into helping Lou escape, and while Lou was in the transfer van, Janet drove the van off the road, shot and killed 2 staff members and helped Lou to escape. After an intense exchange, Lou forced Janet to give her the gun. Lou then knocked out Janet and put her in the boot of the car and drove off. Sandy Edwards turned up at Wentworth with an army of protesters wanting to get their hands on Denise Tyler. Rita broke out of H1 after she attacked Linda and threw Linda and Artie into a cell and locked the door. Rita made her way down to isolation, knocked out an officer and entered Denise Tyler's cell. When Denise asked Rita who she was, Rita replied saying, "I am your worst fucking nightmare." The protesters are still on the grounds of Wentworth trying to bang their way into reception. More police have turned up and are trying to get things under control. In H1, Linda is banging on the cell door calling to Ali and Boomer. Boomer comes over to the door and says, "What is it, Miss Miles?" Linda tells Boomer to open the door now. And Boomer says, "I'm sorry, Miss Miles, I can't hear what you're saying." Linda says, "Jenkins, open this fucking door now, otherwise you're going in the slot for a month." And Boomer says, "Oh, Miss Miles, just chill and have a nap with Mr. Birdsworth." Linda then shouts out, "Jenkins!" And Boomer goes back to Ali and they keep the TV turned up. Artie tells Linda to calm down and Linda then pulls out a hip flask from her pocket and takes a swig. She looks over at Artie and says, "You never saw this, okay?" Down at reception, and Jake tells Vera and Will that he can't find Janet Latham anywhere. Vera says that Janet isn't here, she ran out of here about an hour ago. And Jake says, "Oh, that's strange, she should still be on duty." Jake then asks, "Where's Linda and Artie?" And Vera says, "Jake, for God's sake, can't you see we have a situation on our hands? Why don't you try radioing them?" And Jake says that he has, they aren't answering. Vera then has a concerned look on her face and leaves reception to go looking for them. We then cut to Lou driving Janet's car, who arrives at her brother's hideout. Trav comes out to see his sister as she pulls up and they give each other a massive hug. Trav asks Lou, "How on earth did you get out?" And Lou says, "It was touch and go, little brother, but I just about manage it. However, I've got some excess baggage in the boot." And Trav is like, "What do you mean?" Lou then opens the boot and reveals a knocked out and hurt Janet Latham. And Trav is like, "Oh fuck Lou, what are you gonna do with her?" And Lou says, "I don't know, I was going to set fire to the car with her inside, but I might actually need this bitch later on." And Trav says, "What do you mean, Lou?" And Lou says, "Well, we've got that phone recording, haven't we? So if we need some extra money or some favours, then we can blackmail this bitch to do anything we pretty much want." And Trav says, "I like your thinking, sis." Vera checks around the prison and the units for Linda and Artie, and she ends up at H1 where she sees Boomer and Ali but not Rita. Vera asks Ali to turn down the loud TV and says, "Where's Rita?" Linda overhears Vera's voice and calls out for help. Vera unlocks the gate immediately and unlocks the cell, and she's like, "What the hell is going on?" Linda says that Connors attacked her and took her keys. Vera then turns to Ali and Boomer and demands to know where Rita is. And Boomer says, "We honestly don't know, Miss Bennett. She took us by surprise." Vera then asks, "Is she trying to escape?" And Ali says, "Honestly, Miss Bennett, we don't know. All we know is that she wanted to go to Blackmore and she was going to have to do it the hard way." The guardian officer that was in isolation comes around and radios through that Denise Tyler has gone missing. Vera hears the call and runs out of H1 and down to the isolation block. She sees the guarding officer and asks if he's okay, and he says, yeah, I'm fine, just got a bit of a sore head. Vera then says, did you see where Tyler went? And he replies by saying no, he came out to investigate a noise and then the lights went out. Will Jackson then radios through to Vera, saying that the police officers have just phoned through. There are 2 prisoners on the roof. We then cut to the roof where Rita is standing near the edge with Denise Tyler. The protesters look up and they start cheering and chanting, "Throw her off! Throw her off!" We cut back to the outside and Janet Latham wakes up in a ditch. Wondering what the hell has happened, Lou Kelly is just behind her and says, "Wakey wakey." Janet turns around and says, "Where the hell are we?" And Lou says, "Oh, we're in the middle of nowhere, Latham. You'll be pleased to know that I ain't going to kill you, not this time. Me and my brother are off now, but we will be back in touch if we need anything." Janet says, "You can't just leave me in the middle of nowhere," and Lou says, "You'll be fine, you're a tough cookie, aren't ya? You'll be hearing from me soon, Latham." Lou then walks away and Trav turns up with his car, and Lou tells Trav to get into the passenger side, she is doing the driving. Lou then jumps in and they drive off, and a hazy Janet crawls out of the ditch and looks around to try and get her bearings. In the car, Trav asks Lou, "Where are we going?" And Lou says, "Oh, we are going somewhere where nobody will find us, but first I want to pay someone a visit." Back on the roof, and Rita is holding Denise near the edge, and Denise says to Rita, "Well, what are you waiting for? If you're going to do it, do it." Vera then turns up on the roof and calls out to Rita, "Rita, what are you doing? You don't need to do this." Rita shouts back, "Nobody is listening to me, Miss Bennett. I went to Jackson and he just ignored me." Vera says, "What is it that you want, Rita?" And Rita says, "I want to go to Blackmore. Ruby is innocent and I need to protect her. And if I have to kill this scumbag to get to Blackmore, then so be it." Vera says, "This isn't the way to help your sister. If she is innocent, then we can find the truth." And Rita says, "No, it's too late. She's been charged. She was days away from getting her parole and someone has set her up." Denise then butts in and says, "I'm sorry to spoil the chat, ladies, but what has any of this got to do with me?" Rita then grabs Denise by the scruff and eases her even more over the edge. Rita says, "You are scum, Tyler. You deserve to die for what you've done." Vera walks closer to Rita and Denise and says, "Rita, as much as I agree with you, we need to let the courts deal with Tyler." Rita says, "No, this is down to me." And Vera says, "No, if anyone deserves to finish Tyler, it's me, Rita, it's me. She hurt my daughter. Don't you think I want her dead too?" Rita then turns to Vera while she's still holding Denise and says, "You what? This bitch hurt your daughter?" And Vera says, "Yes, Rita, she hurt Grace, which is what led to the discovery of the bodies at her house." And Rita looks at Denise in disgust. Denise then turns to Vera and says, "Oh, grow some balls, Miss Bennett. Stop whining like a little girl. Is it any wonder why Grace cries all the time? You're a useless fucking mother." Vera then tells Denise to shut it. And Denise says, "Why? Why should I shut it? Your baby Grace deserved what she got. The only thing I regret is that I didn't finish her off." Vera's face then turns to thunder, and Rita looks quite concerned by the situation that's developing. Denise goes on to say, "You're gutless, Vera. You had the chance to finish me off when Jake had his hands around my throat, but you chickened out and pulled him off me. You're weak, just like your daughter. What hope has she got with a mother like you? She would have been better off if I had actually killed her." Vera then sees red and runs towards Denise and Rita, who are right on the edge of the roof. As Vera launches herself at Denise, Rita stands back and lets Denise go, and Vera unbelievably pushes Denise off the roof. Denise goes over the edge. She falls all the way down to the ground, and there is a huge bang as she hits the floor in front of all the police and the protesters. Rita looks at Vera as Vera looks down at Denise's dead body. Will and Jake come running onto the roof, and Will grabs Vera from the edge and Jake grabs Rita. Will says, "What have you done, Vera? Shit, what have you done?" Jake and Will look at each other in shock, and Vera is also shocked at what she has just done. A montage plays out as a load of the protesters are arrested. The police corner off Denise's dead body on the ground. We cut to Vera, who is sitting in an interview room waiting for the police to come in and question her. Vera is sitting there in disbelief of what she has done. The news quickly spreads around the prison, and Rita is taken to the slot by Jake. Rita says to Jake that she didn't know what Denise had done to Grace, and goes on to say that it's all her fault. "It should have been me who have thrown her off the roof, not Vera. I just want to go to Blackmore to protect Ruby. I didn't want any of this." Jake then says, "Well, you've got your wish, Connors. You're being transferred first thing in the morning." Jake then locks the door. Back in the interview room, and the police arrive to question Vera. As they ask her questions, Vera is still in shock and she's struggling to find her voice. Jake arrives at the doorway and watches through the window. Vera then looks up at the detective and says she didn't mean to do it. The officer then says, "So, you're admitting that you pushed Tyler?" And Vera says, "She was saying the most awful things to me about my daughter. She was goading me." The officer says, "I understand, Miss Bennett, I really do. I have a 3-year-old daughter myself. However, I cannot condone your actions. You pushed an inmate off the prison roof. Now that prisoner is dead." Vera then says, I know, I've destroyed my life, my career, everything." Vera then breaks down and cries, and Jake's hearts break as he watches through the glass. The minister is with Will in his office, and the minister is questioning Artie about what happened. Artie explains that Rita Connors was out of control, and that he had no choice but to do what she said. Linda backs up Artie, but the minister is not impressed. He tells Artie that he wants to see a stern improvement if he's ever going to progress in his training at Wentworth. Artie and Linda are then dismissed from the office, and Will then asks the minister what's happening with Vera. And the minister replies saying, "She's currently being interviewed as we speak, but I think it's safe to say that Vera is in serious trouble. Whether or not if she's charged, I'm gonna have to remove her as the general manager and from the whole prison service." Will then says, "Do you really have to do that, Minister?" And the Minister says, "I don't think you realise the seriousness of this, Mr. Jackson. Miss Bennett has just killed a prisoner in front of hundreds of people and police officers." Will then says, I know, but with all due respect, Minister, if Denise Tyler hadn't been sent here, then maybe this would have never have happened." And the minister says, "Miss Bennett is supposed to be a professional. That's what I thought anyway. The only person to blame here is Miss Bennett." Will's phone then rings and he answers. He receives some alarming news. His house is on fire. Will slams down the phone and leaves the prison, jumps on his motorbike and heads home. When he gets there, his whole house is ablaze. He takes off his helmet and tries to run towards the house, but the firemen hold him back, saying that there is nothing that he can do, leave it to us. Will puts his hand over his head as he realises that he has just lost his home and everything inside. Back in the prison, and Vera is being charged for Denise's murder. As the police handcuff Vera, they bring her out of the interview room, and Jake asks the officers if he can quickly speak with her, which they agree. Vera tells Jake to move into her house and look after baby Grace. She needs stability after everything that's happened. Jake says, "Of course, Vera, I will do it exactly what you say and I'll go and look after her." "But where are they taking you?" And Vera says that she's being taken down the station for now, but goes on to say, "Please don't worry about me. Just go, get all your stuff, move into my house and look after Grace. She's really going to need you now." Will comes back to the prison and sees Vera being taken away in the police car. He bumps into Jake, and Jake asks him, is he okay? And Will tells him that his house has completely burnt down. And Jake is like, oh shit, no way, how the hell did that happen? And Will says that he has no idea. The fire forensics are gonna have to go over the place when they're able to. Jake then offers Will to move into Vera's house with him and baby Grace, and Will says, "Are you sure?" And Jake replies, "To be honest, Will, I know we've had our issues over the years, but I could really do with some help with Grace right now. My head is spinning at everything that has happened, and I know Vera would have offered you if she could have." Will then turns around and says, "Thanks, Jake." Lou and Travis arrive outside a country house, and Trav asks Lou, "Where are we, sis? Who lives here?" Lou has an angry look on her face and says, "This is where Reb's mum lives, Olivia. I have some unfinished business with her." Trav then says, "It doesn't look like anyone is home," and Lou says, "Perfect. Let's park this car on the back and let's go and make ourselves at home." Lou breaks the back door and they both let themselves in. Lou sees some of Reb's photos in the living room, but it really pisses Lou off because the photos that are up on the wall is when Reb was a girl and in a dress. Lou picks up one of the photos and smashes it on the floor. Trav asks Lou, "So what are we actually doing here?" And Lou says, "This is the perfect hideout for now. Nobody will think of looking here for us. And I want to ask Mrs. Olivia Keane some questions." Trav then sees a calendar on the wall where it says that Olivia is away until tomorrow. So Lou says, "That's fine, we can wait." The minister is in Will's office as Will comes back in, and the minister tells Will that Janet Latham has just been admitted to hospital, and Will is like, "Oh shit, is she okay?" And the minister says, "Yep, she'll be fine. She was involved in a nasty car accident, so she'll be out of action for a while. Hopefully she'll be back on duty in a couple of days." The minister then tells Will that there will be a few new prisoners arriving in the morning. We then cut to the following morning, and a prison van is waiting to take Rita to Blackmore. Linda and Artie arrive at the slot to take her, and Rita apologizes to Linda and Artie for what she did. Linda just tells Rita to shut up and to come with them. They then escort her to the van, and Rita takes one final look at Wentworth before getting into the van, and then the van drives away. As the van drives away, another one arrives with 3 new inmates. We have Sandy Edwards, Ali's friend from the past and the main instigator of the protest. Sitting next to Sandy is new inmate Margot Gaffney. She's in for grievous bodily harm and someone who doesn't make friends easily. And the third inmate in the back of the van is a face from the past, Maxine Conway. As the doors open, Maxine says, "Deja fucking vu." Jake and Will arrive at the prison together, and they see the minister arriving in the car park. Jake runs over and asks the minister if he's heard what's happening with Vera and if he knows which prison she's going to be going to. The minister says that Vera will not be coming to Wentworth for obvious reasons, but that's all he can say for the moment. He says that if you want to know more, you need to speak with her solicitor. Linda and Artie are doing inductions this morning, and they start with Sandy Edwards, born on the 4th of August 1991. Linda asks Sandy for her next of kin, and Sandy says that there's no one. Next is Margot Gaffney, born on the 26th of February 1989. Margot asks Linda if there is a chicken here called Kaz Proctor. Linda replies saying, "Why do you want to know?" Margot says, "Oh, I was just thinking it would be good to catch up with an old friend." And Linda says, "Well, I'm sorry to burst your bubble, Gaffney, but Kaz was killed 2 years ago. So if you were any kind of friend, then surely you would have known that." Margot then gives Linda an evil smirk. Next is Maxine Conway. Linda says, "It's a shame to see you back here, Conway. What happened?" Maxine replies, "I'm not in the mood, Miss Miles. Let's just get this over with." Linda then looks at Maxine's file and it says that she hit her ex-partner Gary over the head with a brick, which has ended up killing him. Sandy, Margot and Maxine are all taken to H1. Boomer screams out Maxine's name and goes running over to give her a massive hug, saying she can't believe it, she's really missed her. Sandy walks up to Ali and says, "Well, it looks like I blew it, kiddo." And Ali looks at Sandy, smiles and says, "Oh, give me a hug, you absolute nutter." Margot then says, "I'll take this one, shall I?" and walks into one of the cells. Boomer asks Maxie what is she doing back here, and Maxine says, "Look, Booms, let me settle in, I'll tell you the full story when I'm ready." Ali says to Sandy, "So, I heard you were the one who caused all that trouble here yesterday." And Sandy says, "You know me, Ali, something had to be done about Tyler. Did you hear that it was the general manager who pushed her off the roof?" And Ali says, "Yep, it really shocked us all." Sandy says, "I don't know who she is, but if she ends up in here with us, we'll have to throw her a massive celebration." Margot then comes out of her cell and says, "Sorry to interrupt you girls, but have you all got names?" Boomer turns around and says, "Yeah, I'm Boomer." Ali turns around and says, "Hey, I'm Ali Novak." And Margot then says, "Ali Novak? That name rings a bell." Ali says, "I don't think we've ever met." And then Margot says, "Weren't you part of that Red Right Hand gang a few years back?" And Ali says, "Yeah, but as you can see, it's all ancient history now." Margot then says, "Yeah, looks like it." Margot then goes back into her cell and looks angry. Boomer starts moaning, saying that she wants to get out of lockdown. She wants to get to her home brew before it ends up exploding. Miss Miles overhears Boomer saying this just around the corner from the unit and continues to listen. Sandy says to Boomer, "Wait, you're brewing some grog?" And Boomer says, "Yeah, it's in the laundry, but I just can't get to it right now. I hope the screws let us out soon." Linda listens to all of this and she has a smile on her face. Over to the derelict building now, where Joan has Dr. Miller captured, and Joan is in the sink washing her face with Dr. Miller chained to the wall. Joan is telling him how she really enjoyed burning down Mr. Jackson's house, and that this is just the start of things to come. Dr. Miller says, "You're never gonna get away with this, Joan. Look, you've burnt his house down now, you've taught him his lesson, now why don't you just put a stop to all of this?" Joan replies, "This is nothing, Dr. Miller. This is just a warm-up. I am going to destroy every inch of Mr. Jackson's life before I take him down for good. And you're going to be a huge part of that, Dr. Miller." Joan then walks over to an armchair and sits down to turn on a TV. Dr. Miller says, "What have you got planned, Joan? You may as well tell me." And Joan says, "Patience, Dr. Miller. All good things come to those who wait." On the TV pops up a news report talking about the murder of Denise Tyler and how General Manager Vera Bennett has been charged with the murder. Joan starts to mutter to herself, "What? This can't be true. No, this shouldn't be happening to you, Vera." Joan gets more and more angry with herself, and Dr. Miller then says, "Are you okay, Joan?" Joan then turns around, walks up to Dr. Miller and smacks him in the face and says, "Quiet! I need to think. I need to think. Joan then paces up and down. The van that Rita is in arrives at the gates of Blackmore. Rita looks out the back window of the van as it enters. The doors then open where there are 3 male officers. Rita steps out of the van and one of the officers, called Officer Carlton, says, "Welcome to Blackmore, Connors." Over at Reb's mother's house, Lou and Travis have made themselves at home. Trav says to Lou, "So what's the deal with Reb, sis? I don't think I've ever seen you stick your neck out for anyone before, well, apart from me." And Lou says, "I was in love with him, Trav. He was my everything until he was taken away. And do you know what makes me sick is all of these photos. Photos of Reb in a dress all over the walls. His mother didn't give a shit about him. She wouldn't even recognize him as a man. She even had him buried in a dress, for fuck's sake." As Lou and Trav are talking, a car pulls up in the driveway. Olivia is home. She gets out of the car and heads to the front door. Lou and Travis hide and Olivia walks into the house. She walks into the living room and sees a smashed photo of Reb on the floor. She bends down to pick her up, and as she gets up, Lou smashes Olivia over the back of the head with a golf club. Back to Blackmore, and Rita is being escorted down a corridor by Officer Carlton just after having her induction. Watching in the distance is the anonymous man who is meeting up with Janet Latham, a man wearing dark glasses. Carlton then gets to the cell door and unlocks it. He then looks at Rita and says, "Here you are, Connors, get yourself comfy." When he opens the door, who should already be in there but Vera Bennett. We cut back to Wentworth, and Jake is furious because he has just found out that Vera has been sent to Blackmore on remand, and storms into Will's office to see the minister. Jake says, "How could you agree to send Vera to Blackmore? It's high security." The minister says, "Yes, I know, Mr. Stewart, but there was no way she could come to this prison." Jake says, "Why couldn't she have gone to an open prison for the time being?" And the minister says, "Because she needs to have easy access to the courts. She hasn't been convicted yet, so there was no other choice." The minister then says, "Sorry, I have to go now, I have a meeting." Jake can't believe it, and Will tells him to calm down. Jake says, "How can I calm down? You've heard all the stories about Blackmore." And Will says, "Yes, I have, but who else do we know has just been transferred to Blackmore?" Jake then says, "Connors." Will says, "Right, and Rita and Vera have always had a good relationship. Rita will look after her, Jake, I'm sure of it." Linda heads to the laundry while it's empty and goes hunting for Boomer's home brew. She looks in the back corner cupboards and opens the door, and she finds it in a huge metal container. She opens the lid and sees it bubbling away. She turns around to make sure that nobody is around, and then looks at the cocktail and says to herself, "Oh, thanks, Boomer, don't mind if I do." Linda then lifts the container and takes a swig. All of a sudden, Linda coughs and chokes, grabs her throat with her hands and starts to scream out in unbearable pain. She falls onto her back on the floor and continues to scream for help. Her whole body starts to convulse and shake, and bubbles of froth start to come out of her mouth as her screams turn into gurgles. Is this the end for Linda Miles?